Testing, testing. Can you hear me? Hello. Hello. What are we doing? There's nobody here. Someone is watching. Welcome. Can anyone hear me now? Hello? All right, cool. I am audible. I appreciate that, Logan. Excellent description. So we can get back to business here. Gonna share a window. Tonight's stream is going to go over script adaptations gone wrong. So I had a whole thing worked out. Unfortunately, I left it on another computer, but it basically covered Arabic, Chinese, Latin script adaptations, because all of the major scripts have been adapted to numerous types of languages, some a little better than others, but most of them fall short simply because a script is not designed to be adapted. A script evolves for the language it is primarily used for. Similar languages or related languages, usually of the same language family, can effectively use a similar script. But two examples that came to mind, which I included a hashtag for this live stream, is Turkish and Korean. They're pretty famous in the linguistics community for having previously used scripts that were not well suited to the language. Turkish, as anyone who's ever studied it knows, has vowel harmony, whereas Arabic, which is the script that was adapted for Turkish when they first converted to Islam, doesn't handle intricate vowels well in a everyday use. In the Quran, the vowels are marked. In a lot of educational materials, vowels are marked for young folks to learn how to read or folks to learn to read. Excuse me. But the average everyday person typically does not mark vowels with the Arabic script. So you could probably imagine that having vowel harmony with a script that doesn't mark vowels explicitly all the time could cause issues with literacy. When I did this paper that I have on a different computer, the numbers I found were up until the alphabet reformation, i.e., going from the Arabic script to the Latin script, your average Turkish speaker could not read above a first grade level. The overall literacy rate was somewhere around 9 to 11% up until 1930 something, 1940 something. Um, it wasn't until the first generation had gone through the education system after the adoption of the Latin script that literacy rates rose above 65%. So that's not just a lack of formal education, because there were schools throughout the Ottoman Empire and throughout what is now Turkey. Um, it was also due to the difficulty or the lack of uh, well suitedness for the Arabic script to Ottoman Turkish or to Turkish in general. Similarly, Korean, being an agglutinative language and also not being Chinese, even though it does borrow some Chinese lexical units, it is not a Chinese language. It is not Cantonese. It is not Shanghainese. It's not um, related directly to Chinese. In fact, it's considered a language isolate, except for all the Altaic fanboys out there. Um, so it was not well. The Chinese Hanza or Chinese characters was not well suited for Korean. They devised a system to use it, and even though 1442 or whatever the year is that King Sejong divinely touched his finger to paper and made the Hangul script, which we won't get into all of that. Even then, the literacy rates were below 15% throughout Korean history until 1947, when the Hangul script was adapted on the entire peninsula. and it took a while. It took a whole generation, just like it did in the Turkish, just like it did in Turkey, before everyone or before the majority of the population was considered literate. So having Chinese Hansa characters, known as Hanja in Korean, was not the best suited system. Now, what we're going to look at here, because like a doofus, I left my paper on another computer. What we're going to look at here is some adaptations of natural scripts for other natural languages that are not historical. They are creations by people out there in the world. Um, and it just, some of these just don't fit at all. And we're going to go over why that's not a good idea to use these types of systems for those types of languages, etc. One that I looked at earlier today that I found pretty egregious is this adaptation of Arabic, or the Arabic script rather, for Nahuatl. Um, and you can tell right off the bat, even though the Arabic script has characters for pa, they just use the ba for pa here. That's not necessary. You can see here they're using something that isn't the cha for the cha, even though Arabic does have an adaptation of a cha. Um, and then, as you can see here, they're using characters again that are not related, that are not used for these sounds. So they're just pretty much just pulling this out from their back pocket whole cloth. It doesn't make sense. One of the things that caught my eye when I first looked at this is they're using qua, or they're using the kaf for the qua. And then I look down here and they explain that it's a reflection of the English orthographic usage of Q in a similar manner. I imagine that some of the viewers here can read right through that nonsense, right? And the vowels here. So um, they use the sukun to mark long vowels. I don't like that. That's weird. And then they use the Hamza diacritic to mark the satiyas. Again, um, not really, not really what they are, right? And so when you do these adaptations, you either have to invent new characters or you have to use the character that most closely aligns. This person obviously did not do that, at least not all the way through. Using the sukun for the long vowels, while it kind of makes sense, there's already a mark for that in Arabic. You don't need to make one up, or repurpose one, rather. Um, in most versions of the Arabic script, ya is generally written with two dots underneath. That's accurate. In certain adaptations, especially those in North Africa and Persia, it is written without. So this person looked at some things but didn't really read them well enough, because um, it's used without, because it's not the same exact sound as the ya. It's used without the two dots, I should say, because it's not the same exact sound, which is fine, but again, not really necessary. And when you come down here and you look at the sample, they probably copy pasted this from some Nawat page that already had it on there. Um, but right off the bat, you look at the very first word, and this is supposed to be nochi. Nochi. Yeah. Um, it doesn't, this doesn't look anything like nochi to me. Where's the O? So you're not marking the O? But how do you distinguish where the O is? All of these vowels are here. He doesn't show any diacritics or lack of diacritics to mark vowels. So it's not consistent even in his own adaptation. Yeah. So this is a weird situation. What was I looking at? Oh, up here, um, he doesn't have the h But if you look here, he's got it right there to mark the ch at the end of tlakame. So his own chart doesn't represent even all the letters that he's using. He's got it here, but that's not what this character is at all. So he's not consistent. So obviously, the Arabic script is not suited very well for Nahuatl. It, I can see how you might make it work, but just from the get-go, it doesn't work well. Not without significant augmentation. Um, Now, one of the ones I wanted to look at here was Maltese. Now, Maltese is a Semitic language. It is highly influenced by Italian, um, but it is a Semitic language. However, right, it does have some sounds that Arabic doesn't have or doesn't use. They're not phonemic. They occur, but they're not phonemic. Um, and for the most part, this person stays pretty true. They do have the che rather than repurposing another letter. They do use the Persian qaf or ga sound. Um, I'm not sure why they're putting the H here in front. Um, I guess it's the name of the character. I don't know. Um, but they do use the pa. They use this O here, which I think is either in the Kurdish version of Arabic or in it's in one of the Central Asian versions of the Arabic script. I can't remember which. Maybe the Pashto um, or Urdu. So this one is not bad. I do think that this digraph here is a bit of a stretch. Um, but other than that, this one's not bad. Again, Maltese being a Semitic language affords this adaptation a little bit of forgiveness, in my opinion. Um, so let's go down here. They got the Armenian alphabet that they've put together with Azerbaijani. I don't know that that's politically a great idea, but whatever. Armerican, used for indigenous American languages. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I already am not a huge fan of the Armenian alphabet aesthetically. I mean, it's okay, but it's not my jam. It's not my thing. And if you look here, they pretty much just follow along with the sounds that are pretty much already used for the Armenian alphabet and just repurpose them. And then they have these letters with an apostrophe. There you go. That's their huge contribution to the Armenian adaptation for indigenous American languages. They just added an apostrophe. Good evening, Juno. Juno is here. Now that's a party. Awesome. And then letters with a mid level dot. Again, not a lot of ingenuity, not a lot of creativity. Juno, you missed the Arabic part of this, but it's all going to be online when we're done here. So this is just lazy and it's aesthetically not very pleasing. Um, it's not. I don't think it was worth this person's time to even do this. um, so here we see some CAS, some Canadian Aboriginal syllabics, and I already don't like the Aboriginal syllabics because they were sort of imposed on the indigenous communities by missionaries and government bureaucrats. Um, but I do like the fact that some indigenous communities have embraced them and sort of retuned them or retooled them to some degree for their own purposes. I do appreciate that and respect that. But they're just not aesthetically pleasing to me. I mean, you take a triangle, turn it 90 degrees, take another 90 degrees, and then you got your four syllables. It's just lazy. Um, but this one here, when I was looking earlier today, this one here caught my eye as probably the most egregious because this is supposed to be CAS for English, right? Um, and it's the question is just why? Why would you do this? It doesn't left to right in horizontal lines. General American English. So this doesn't even account for Southern English or whatever, just general American English. If you saw an adaptation like this posted somewhere online, I'm pretty sure you'd look at it in about 20 minutes, about 2, 3 minutes, and you'd move on. Um, I don't know why they felt the need to differentiate long vowels from short vowels. My guess is because they had the dot, and they figured they needed to. Um, quick question though, where's the O? Anybody notice that? We definitely have O as a phoneme in General American English. Go? No? So? Thank you, Logan. All right. At Logan's very sensible suggestion, we will move on. The Quechua syllabic thing, I did look at it briefly. It's not great. I spent even less time on this one than I did the English one. Coptic alphabet for Latin, which is just hilarious on its face without even clicking on it, because as we all know, Coptic was derived from Greek, as was Latin, the Latin alphabet. So it's like borrowing something twice. I do think that it's interesting here that we have a Coptic adaptation for Akkadian. Um, Akkadian being Akkadian being a Semitic language, Coptic being Afro-Asiatic. Um, it kind of works, but it kind of doesn't, right? Again, Coptic was derived from Greek, and they added some letters, and you can see here they had to add some more for Akkadian. It's not interesting linguistically, and it's definitely not very creative script-wise. Now, show of hands, anybody like Cyrillic? Anybody? I don't like Cyrillic. I find it blocky and ugly. Uh, she says, Juno says it's okay. I grew up in the 80s, so part of my dislike is conditioning and propaganda. Oh, Logan likes Cyrillic. Consider me shocked. And Saton says he enjoys it where it's needed. And I don't know where that would be because it ain't needed. Yes, I agree, Logan. It is very much an acquired taste. Um, it doesn't, to me, it just doesn't do it. It doesn't even get my engine started. Chips and Fish says it's great. Yeah, each to his own, each to their own. But as you can see here, there are countless adaptations of Cyrillic. Um, I'm not even going to respond to that, Satan. Um, countless adaptations of Cyrillic for various languages, some of which are uh, for languages that just doesn't make sense. Tlingit, that doesn't make sense. Italian, maybe, whatever. Ainu doesn't make sense. Bengali, what are we talking? Like, how? Why? It just doesn't make sense. So the Devanagari is a little different. I'm also not a fan of the cross bar, the bar across the top. I do like its artistry though. It's very curly Q-y. It's got a lot going on. It can be a little intimidating for someone trying to learn to read it. Um, but it is an abugida, and abugidas are pretty cool, just as a standard. So this one for Japanese is pretty straightforward, pretty basic. I wanted to show it to you guys. Obviously, you're going to have your standard 5 vowels and their long, their corresponding long vowels, and then you got your two diphthongs there. Um, and of course, because it's an abugida and um, Japanese is a open syllable language, it's pretty easy to adapt. I didn't really look at this one too closely to see whether or not it adapted phonologically well. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the bar across the top um, in Devanagari, but I can see its appeal. I can understand its appeal to some degree, more so than Cyrillic, that's for sure. So then Devanagari for Arabic kind of doesn't make sense to me. Again, Arabic, spoken Arabic, you can definitely feels like it's got a lot more vowels than it does. Spoken Arabic, that is. I have experience being in a room with a Lebanese, Jordanian, and a Qatari, and listening to them have a conversation. And you would think that there are seven or eight, maybe nine vowels going on, um, and some diphthongs, right, going on, maybe even some triphthongs. Um, the thing about it is, in written Arabic, excuse me, there's only three long vowels, right? That we know, and that's just the way it's written. It's got some short vowels and it's got some additions and things like that. But the way it's written, of course, as we know, is not always the way it's spoken. So this adaptation of Devanagari for Arabic it looked a little weird to me when I looked at it earlier. Um, I can see it, I can understand what they're doing here, but it's still a little weird. Um, it's it's weird to think of a triconsonantal root system language using an abugida, just from a structural perspective, from like a functional perspective, not even aesthetics. So that was kind of one of the things I wanted to touch on. Um, I know Gaz exists, Satan. You're right. You're right. I don't know that I would necessarily call it an abugida. I know it's called that, it's labeled that, but it's kind of, I don't know. It's more of, it looks to me more like when it's written out, it looks more like a syllabary to me, which is again weird because it's a Semitic language, triconsonantal roots, etc. But nonetheless, this one it brings me back to where I wanted to sort of touch on. When you're thinking about an adaptation of of a natural script for your language, you shouldn't start with the aesthetics. You should start with the function. What are the phonotactics? What is the syllable structure of your language that you're trying to adapt a natural script to? Excuse me. If an alphabet works best, go for it. Maybe an abjad works best, but it's probably going to be an impure abjad, right? Um, if an abugida works, great. If you need a logosyllabary because you have a lot of like homonyms or you have uh, a lot of words that are very close in sound, maybe not exactly the same. Um, that's an idea to keep in mind. One of the reasons why I think Chinese hasn't developed a different form of writing in this modern age is because they have a lot of homonyms. They have a lot of syllables that, uh, depending on context, can mean different things, but always sound similar or the same. You have one syllable, it has five different tones. Mandarin, I'm speaking about, has five different tones, but even those five different tones can sometimes have multiple meanings. So having a logography or an ideography or pictography suits the language better than having any other system of writing, except for spoken language. Obviously, you have to hear it in context. But you could write a single word with a logography and it not be mistaken for another word because it is unique or 90% unique. Maybe it's one stroke different than another syllable that sounds similar. So when you think about making a script or adapting a natural script for your language, think about how your language works before you pick the script. Don't do it by aesthetics first. maybe do it by aesthetics, but you're still going to end up doing a lot of augmentation. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole. And I agree with you, Juno. Going through the Chinese homophones is insane. Georgian alphabets, I feel similarly about Georgian as I do about Armenian. It's cool. It serves its purpose. But as you can see here, they adapted it for Serbian. Then they adapted it for Quechua, which seems weird again. Um, I guess it works. Um, but it again, it feels like trying to stick a triangle into a circle. It's just there's some sharp edges there as far as the phonemes and phonology works, the way those work. Then you have your glagolitic. They did it for Spanish. Glagagnol, like, okay, portmanteau, great. You smushed the words together, great. They got it for Croatian and Polish. I can see maybe Croatian. I don't know why you would do that for Spanish, and I don't know what this is. This is just a little gap on Simon's page here. I thought that was cool when I saw it earlier. Greek, the Greek alphabet is the Greek alphabet. It's got its ups and its downs. There's certain aspects of it I like, other aspects of it I don't. As you can see here, this person adapted it for Spanish, and they went all the way out of their way to call it the Hispanic alphabet. Um, to some degree, I would agree with you, Juno, that Spanish might be written nicely with abugida. Probably the only issues you're going to run into is some of your initial clusters. But I mean, you have the Varama. You can use the Varama, but you got your like flora, right? That kind of thing. Your FLs, your uh, even your STs, right? SPs, um, things like that. But yeah, this one, I don't know why you're calling these diphthongs. You see this right here? This makes me mad. These are clearly not diphthongs because it includes consonants, and that is one vowel sound. Yes, agreed, Juno. It is weird. So sometimes it's difficult to assess some of these things when you look at them online. I perhaps they did mean digraphs. It's possible, but again, like it looks weird, right? That's what I was going for, though. What I was getting ready to say is when you look at these things and you want to assess them for how you might be able to use this adaptation as either inspiration or as a guide, you really have to be careful about what you're looking for. Um, and I agree with that statement there, Satone. Uh, use one script and not use the patterns that exist, because there are patterns in Greek that you could use for the patterns in Spanish without having to come up with new things. Um, yeah. Now, the Hebrew adaptations, similar to the Arabic adaptations, we have to keep in mind Hebrew is a triconsonantal root language. It is Semitic. It only has the 22 characters plus the five special endings, right? Um, so does it work well for a language that has maybe 30 or 32 consonant sounds? Maybe. But this one here that I looked at earlier, um, this one just weirded me out. It's for Mandarin Chinese using the Hebrew alphabet. Um, it is used for Yiddish, but I would argue that Yiddish has moved. Yes, well, I would argue that it's a modified abjad in all cases, right? Even for modern Hebrew, Um, it's not an absolute abjad, but it's also not necessarily a complete alphabet either, or only an alphabet, right? Um, Yiddish and Ladino both, and there was one other um, derived language from. Anyway, the point is, they use characters. They give characters multiple meanings or multiple uses, either where they are in the word or annotations like here. Um, I forget the name of this freaking little mark here, but it's used as a modifier for consonants. And Hebrew uses it too. Um, but here you can see um, this is just weird that they use the bet for puh. It's just weird. So what do they use? It's weird. Uh, and then you can see here that they use the vowel diacritics as to mark tone, which again, it's well, I guess those aren't all vowel diacritics from Hebrew, but yeah. And they just use aleph for the final I. Uh, yeah, it's not a good adaptation. I don't understand how you could use Hebrew for Mandarin Chinese. The sounds just don't work. If a Hebrew person, excuse me, a Hebrew speaker saw this and tried to read it, they'd probably get a headache immediately. So Juno is saying ultimately it's going to be difficult to neatly classify systems of reference designed partially unconsciously over generations of iteration. Yes. Took me a minute to think about what you're saying, but I completely agree with you. And then they used Hebrew for Turkish. Again, I don't I don't understand why you would use 22 character system when the target language has so many more sounds. It's weird. It's sort of self-defeating, I think. I, so Tone, you're touching on something that is sort of thematic to this evening. What we're seeing a lot of is folks trying to turn a already existing system into a cipher for another language. I would agree completely with that assessment. And that's really what we're looking at here. Now, I would also just go ahead and point out that one of the other things I was going to talk about is a natural system that is imposed on another natural language, either through politics, trade, religious conversion, or something of that nature. So the stuff we just saw on Omniglot, whether you like it or you don't like it, that's fine. I find some of it to be just outright rude to my eyeballs. But here, if we scroll down here, we can see it says such languages still using Arabic or Persian, Urdu, Uyghur, Kurdish, Pashto, Punjabi, etc. Right? Multiple languages still use the your Arabic script. Some of the adaptations work well. Some of them not well at all. Um, I would argue the further east you go, the worse, in my mind, the adaptations become. Partly because of the languages, but also I my thought is that historically, as Islam moved to the east, i.e., into places like Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., Philippines, the scholarship changed. The scholarship shifted as to how to adapt certain sounds to the writing. I don't have any like research or studies to back that up, but based on what I know about the history of Islam moving eastward, it seems to track because it took longer for it to move to the far east than it did for it to move into Northern Africa. And if you look at Northern Africa, not only did they adapt the Arabic alphabet, but they just Arabized. They started to speak Arabic, right? They took on Arabic names. Um, Chips and fish, yes, I would say hegemony plays a role, but it's not just that it plays a role, it's how quickly, how forcibly, and who is doing the spreading. So if you go to a place like Indonesia, they use the Arabic script, but not all the time. They use both. They use the Latin script and the Arabic script to write out Indonesian. And there are multiple dialects. There are dozens of, I think there's 2 or 3 dozen languages that are recognized in Indonesia. So it's not just a question of Islam and Arabic. It's a question of which languages adapted it, how quickly, and how well. But yes, um, so if we look here, this is a map, worldwide use of the Arabic script, and you can see the dark green is, of course, the Arabian Peninsula, and it moves into the east, and it's even used in China, mostly by the Uyghur community, and it's used down here, and it's used right there in a little island there. I forget which island that is. Um, one of the adaptations I wanted to show you for Arabic, well, first off, yeah, 1928. So the Turkish, is it going to be on here? Let's see here. Ottoman Turkish. So the official language of the Ottoman Empire was Ottoman Turkish, and as you can see here, it was spread over a lot of the areas that the Arabic script is still used in. Yeah, except now it's not used really in Turkey anymore, except for in mosques and in the Quran and in some um, weddings and like wedding invitations and things like that. You might occasionally walk by a restaurant that has the sign in written in the Arabic script or the Ottoman Turkish Arabic script, um, but it's not as common as it once was. Um, Here's some examples of a Ottoman lexeme that has been replaced by a modern Turkish one, and it's written both the Ottoman Turkish is written both with the Arabic and a Latin uh, sample. What's interesting is when you look at the chart. Where is the chart? It's all the way down here. Yeah. Ah, there we go. That's the one. When you look at the chart, you can see they used some characters for multiple sounds, and they used Persian versions for one sound. Um, the nya isn't even used now in the Latin uh, Turkish adaptation in the Latin adaptation for Turkish. Um, so things changed even from Ottoman Turkish, the Latin that was used, to the Latin that's used now, the Latin alphabet that's used now. Um, Again, Turkish used this because of politics, because of religion, because of trade. It didn't use it because it was best suited for the language. And I think that those are the concepts that a conscriptor should keep in mind when developing a script adaptation for their conlang, or when trying to use a natural script as inspiration for for a script. You have to keep in mind that politics, economics, geography, all of those things have a huge influence, or can have a huge influence on your script adaptation. Turkish worked, but it didn't work well for the majority of the population. Again, the literacy rate at the end of the Ottoman Empire was around 8 to 11%. If you keep those kinds of numbers in mind, you'll realize that your script needs to be easy to learn, easy to read for the language it's used for. And then I was going to show you Swahili. Is that on this list? It's not here. But I'll show you Malay. Malaysian is weird because they have indigenous writing too, right? Um, but they also use the Arabic script. I guess it's up here. Yeah, the Jawi. So it's not used frequently, but it was used and it is used occasionally in some areas. I know I watched a travel video um, probably last year sometime, and as you can see, the street signs still have Arabic script on them, but the person in the video, the guide in the video, was going through like a bazaar, shopping as one does, and they came across a little booth there, and there was a nice lady wearing a hijab, and she had stacks of paper on one side, and she had some framed calligraphy sitting next to her. And so what she was offering was, I forget how much it was. I think it came out to be like $5. She would do your name in the Jawi version of the Arabic script. Um, and so the tour guide said, "Oh, my name is Michael. You do that." And so she did Michael. It looked really great. It was really awesome. So there's still an artistic tradition there of using the Arabic script as it was adapted for Malaysian, but it isn't always used. Um, Again, it's on street signs, supermarket store, right? And if you know anything about Arabic, that's just phonetically spelled out. Supa, that's not phonetic there. That's the word for save, whatever it is. Honestly, makes sense given how even yes. I've lived and worked in the Middle East, Juno, and I can tell you that they like the Arabic script. They'll use the Arabic script, but they're just as keen to use Latin. And a lot of them, I shouldn't say a lot of them, many of the ones I knew and worked with, when they would get a new phone, they would not put it. They would go to the settings and not put it in Arabic. They would leave it in English, and then when they wanted to text with their friends, they would use the Arabic text alphabet, which is like a Latin transliteration. Like using the digits 7 for the ha, and the letter or the number 3, the digit 3 for ain. So they 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 use the Arabic script. They know the Arabic script. They read it all the time, but they're just as keen to transliterate using the Latin alphabet, especially in day-to-day stuff. Um, uh, some of the menus at restaurants in some parts of the Middle East, they don't even use the Arabic script. They put the name of the dish in Arabic, but it's spelled out in the Latin alphabet, um, because most people can at least read that, like shish tawuk, right? Shish tawuk is like it's a chicken shish kebab, right? So they'll just spell out shish tawuk in the Latin alphabet because the Arabic speaker looks at it and knows exactly what it is, and the dumb tourist or whomever can say, "Oh, excuse me, sir, what is shish tawuk?" Because you can read it. It's not that foreign, so that's why they do it that way. Um, so the Chinese characters have been adapted to a lot of things, but I wanted to talk about the giant elephant in the room before we close out this evening, and that is the Latin alphabet. The Latin alphabet has been adapted to write hundreds, if not thousands, of languages, in indigenous American languages that don't work well with 26 characters. Vietnamese, yes, thank you. Oh wait, Vietnamese use of Chinese characters is honestly lovely. I If you're talking about Chunam, I kind of think you're right. I kind of agree with you to a point. But there are other Vietnamese scripts that I think would have worked better historically that never caught on. They never got popular. And that's really what we're talking about, right? What is most readily available? What is most expedient for political reasons, for economic reasons, for cultural reasons, or social reasons? That's what these adaptations usually stem from. They don't stem from necessarily what works best. Chips and Fish is asking about what about hieroglyphs? What about them? I don't know what you're asking me. Are you asking me would they be adaptable to something? Because to my knowledge, they only were ever used for Egyptian. But the Latin alphabet, back to what I was saying, um, was even imposed on English speakers, right? English being Germanic, and the versions of English that preceded what we know of today as English. Um, yes, Juno, very much silly sauce. Um, Used a version of runes. Runes were used throughout Northern Europe, but the Romans came through and a lot of that changed. Not immediately, but over centuries, right? And the argument is out there that English, even today, the English that you and I can read and speak, would be better written with a runic type alphabet because of the characters and how they align with the English phonology. It would be easier to read, it would be easier to write, etc. Because we have somewhere around 42 to 44 sounds, depending on who you're talking to, depending on which dialect you're referring to. So 26 letters just off the top probably isn't going to cut it, except that there aren't 43 runes either, right? There, if I remember correctly, there's 29, I think, something like that. So you're still going to have weird vowels. Um, um, I think you should. I think you should look into it, Juno, because it's pretty. The theories that I've read um, suggest that it was just north of the Alps, and people were seeing Etruscan and Old Italic writing, and they were taking those characters and morphing them and using them for Germanic languages, and then it spread north. That's one of the theories I've seen. Um, and it kind of makes sense just based on trade and normal human migration, that those characters would be repurposed. It also makes sense from a no, it was not aliens, chips and fish. We don't talk about aliens. Shh, they might be listening. Uh, the it also makes sense from a resources perspective that they became angular and that there are no curves because they were carving them in trees, carving them on wood because they did not have paper making technology. Um, no, that's you're right. The colonial Greek script is also one of the theories that I've heard about. But thank you. Um, yes, the Northern Italic A. So the A, there's a I think the I, um, the O. So there's some of the you if you look at it carefully, you can sort of see the correlations and see the correspondence. Um, the long and the short of it is that regardless of where they came from, they were better adapted to the Germanic languages than the Latin alphabet ever could be. Um, Even though they still lack the full set of sounds, not every system writes every sound. Not every sound is in every writing system, right? As I've said before, language is not writing, writing is not language. One is a tool to communicate the other. Um, so the idea, though, with Latin the Latin alphabet, as you can see there on your screen, it was imposed through hegemony, as mentioned previously, uh, talking about the Arabic script. It was imposed on languages that it was not suited for, and it is still used for languages it is not suited for. I would argue it's not well suited for Maltese, even though Maltese uses the Latin alphabet or a modified form of it. So, other than English and maybe a couple of other languages, other European languages, um, yes, Irish, yes, Irish, a couple of other European languages, every single iteration of the Latin alphabet has had to be modified in order to fit the language it's being used for, other than Latin. Here in American English, we don't really use accent marks or diacritics of any kind. We use the apostrophe to demonstrate possession, but I mean that's a grammatical feature, right? So if you look at French, yes, we are. I'm allergic to diacritics. I despise them, except in conscripts. I love them in conscripts, depending on what kind it is. If it's a syllabary, what do we need a diacritic for? If it's an abugida, you have to have them. Logosyllabary depends. What are you using it for? Um, but if you look at the languages that that the Latin alphabet is used for today, almost none of them are unaugmented. French is more systematic than English. Debatable. Um, if you mean systematic as in it was derived from Latin, I guess, but almost 60% of our vocabulary is also French, or we have a majority of vocabulary borrowed from French. So I don't know what you mean, or more systematic. So the takeaway tonight, the spelling system, sure, maybe. I think English is systematic. I think it has become more systematic over time. Uh, the way Shakespeare spelled when he wrote was less systematic than the way I spell, but we were writing more or less the same version of English. So, with some exceptions, sure. Um, you think the patterns in French are more predictable? Well, possibly. Possibly they are more predictable. I think that the patterns in English are very predictable too, though. Um, that's probably because I've studied etymology, right? And so if you know where a word comes from, you can pretty quickly deduce how it should be spelled. Um, like if I hear the word kimono, I know that that's probably a Japanese word, right? So it's probably spelled Japanese. Oh, so it's going to have a K, not a C or a QI, right? That kind of thing. But that's just because I'm a nerd like that. Most people aren't going to know that. So when you are adapting a script for your language, or you are adapting your language to a script, keep in mind that you may be uh, embarking on a futile enterprise. You may be absolutely trying to ice skate uphill. Um, it's not it's not good for your mental well-being. The best thing to do is once you have an established phonology and you have an inkling, it doesn't have to be perfectly worked out yet. But once you have an inkling of what your phonotactics and your syllable structure is going to look like, that's when you can make a decision on where to start with your script. If you just straight up adapt Arabic to uh, a tonal syllabic open syllable language, you're going to be writing a lot of diacritics all the time to make sure your vowels and your tones and all that stuff are marked. When in fact, an abogida probably would have been just fine. Um, I had a discussion not too long ago with somebody, and they were pretty pretty clear in their opinion that conlingers choose abogidas more frequently than they choose any other type of system. And I think that's true. I think that's accurate because those are easy, right? You come up with 25 to 30, maybe 35 symbols, and then you just augment them a little bit with diacritics or little changes here and there. Also, they're cool. That is correct, Juno. The abugidas are cool. Logosyllabaries are cool too. It's just that they are a massive undertaking, right? Um, and they can be a headache to properly design and track without losing your mind. The good ones that I've seen are, in my mind, insane. I don't know how these folks keep up with them. They have to be annotating every day at least two or three characters because there's so much going on. Um, I think this is what you kept misunderstanding my writing system for mountain and how it transformed from an alphabet into an abjad. If you say so. I don't remember that conversation, but that's fine. Um, yeah, that's I understand. I think I understand what you're talking about, but that's not typically how it works. From a linguistics and a historical perspective, alphabets don't turn into abjads. Abjads turn into alphabets. So, um, so we've been online here for a little over an hour. I have thoroughly enjoyed everybody's questions and comments. Uh, I really appreciate you guys coming and watching the live stream. I apologize for the earlier audio issues. I'll try to make sure that doesn't happen for the next stream, whenever that is. Speaking of the next stream, um, anyone who has any suggestions for the next stream, please feel free to drop me a line, uh, either here on the YouTube page or in the Discord channel. Uh, Wherever you find me, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Mastodon. I no longer check the former bird site anywhere. I don't ever look at that thing. So, but if you have an idea or if you want to go over a particular script that you know is out there, we can do that too. Just reach out to me and let me know. All right. Enjoy and keep everybody. Okay.